Back in 2019, I went to visit my grandma, Margaret Barnett, who had lived her entire 95 years in western Montana in and around Missoula. I knew her mind was starting to fade, and I may not have many more opportunities to sit down and ask her about her life. I wanted to know about her childhood, her marriage, the iconic Buffy tree, and her thoughts on living and dying. She is probably the most optimistic person I have ever known. Rarely ever had I seen her get upset, complain, or even show much frustration. She always just seemed to accept life for what it was. This is a glimpse into her story, a life of optimism.
I haven't had much frustration in my life. Things have just fallen in place for me. And my family, there's not a one of you that I can even feel bad about. You're all doing really, really well, I think. And I'm very grateful for that. Joyce and Albert turned out to be super good people. And so I just, I can't think of anything to complain about. I was outside all the time. From the minute I got home from school, I'd change my clothes and go outside until time to go to bed. I'd play marbles, I'd dig a bunch of holes, and then I had an imaginary friend who played with me. We took turns, and so I was really quite happy as a young kid. My dad was, I don't know how to describe him. He was a surveyor, and I used to be his helper. I would go out and hold the pole while he was surveying, and I loved doing things with my dad. He was great. Never had much feeling for my mother. She was more of an embarrassment to me. When she was about 28, I think, she was thrown from a horse and hit her head, the temple, and was unconscious for several hours. And then she began to have these epileptic seizures. And I was always in horror for fear she'd have one of these seizures when I was out with her, and it would be so embarrassing. And at that time, that's the way I felt about it. After I got out of high school, I went to Duluth, Minnesota, and stayed with an aunt. One day, Aunt Ida came home from school, and she said, "Margaret, you're going to go to college." So I went. I started and went. Never regretted it. She was a big influence in my life. I owe her a lot.
After college, she went on to become a social worker, then a grade school teacher, and a librarian. During her time as a social worker, she was working at a state hospital in Warm Springs. This is where she met my grandpa, Bob Barnett.
He was a hearing aid salesman. One of the patients had a hearing aid and needed a battery. And so Bob came out to the hospital to see this man and see what kind of a hearing aid he had and what kind of a battery he would need. I couldn't talk to him for very long, but he called that evening and invited me out to dinner, and so that was the beginning. I knew right away that that was the one for me. I thought he would never propose. We were coming home from hiking, and he said something about, maybe we should get married. And I said, yes. I was ready. I'd been waiting and waiting and waiting for him to propose. He was a very gentle person, very considerate. He was extremely honest. The only thing he wasn't pushy enough. He would let people crowd him out. And I remember I was on a tour one time, and it was in Italy, and everybody was trying to get a ticket, and he was up there, and they kept pushing him back, and he let them push him out. And I said, I was sitting by these two women, and I said, look at that. Why doesn't he get in there? And they said, don't you complain at all. It's so nice to see a man that doesn't have to be so macho. And they really shut me up in a hurry. Joyce was the oldest. We just had two. And then we decided we better have another, and luckily we had a little boy, and that was all we wanted, was just the two. Albert, he was really mellow and laid back. Joyce was a little bit nasty to him sometimes. I used to say, Joyce, you better watch it. He's going to get bigger than you. We never tried to force anything down them. Like, I had to go to Sunday school, and I had to go to church, and I had to do this, and I hated it. So we tried to let them pretty well decide how they wanted to go. You never know what you're doing, if you're doing more harm than good when you have little kids.
I think both my grandparents would have readily admitted that Buffy, their furball Pomeranian, was their third child. She was paramount to their lives. So much so that when Buffy died, her legacy will live on for many years to come up on Blue Mountain.
She was just a perfect little dog as far as we were concerned. One Friday night, she slept in the same bed that I did. I knew she was uncomfortable. I woke up in the morning and she was gone. She was dead. We took her hiking or camping out and stuff all the time. And so we said, well, let's take her ashes up on the hill and find a tree that's kind of unusual. And so we found this one kind of off by itself. We called it the Buffy tree. It turned from a little round tree into a beautiful big pointed pine tree. And I think it's because we gave it so much attention. Because every time we went up on the hill there walking, we'd go over and because of Buffy's ashes being there. Bob decided he wanted his ashes sprinkled up there, and I decided I wanted my ashes, and so we just call it the Buffy tree because she's the one that started it.
My grandma loved to travel, but during the interview, she couldn't recall many details. However, she does remember that during her middle age, traveling was her main goal, to visit the many places around the globe.
For 25 years, I think every summer I'd go somewhere for 6 or 8 weeks or something, and it was great. That was my main object when I was middle-aged, was to get out and travel some. And I just wanted to see all these things I'd read about in history, and I enjoyed it ever so much.
If I had to choose one activity that summarized my grandma's life, it would be hiking. There's no telling how many miles and trails that she hiked in her lifetime. Even into her 80s, you could find her walking the trails up at Patty Canyon, Blue Mountain, and the famous M on the side of Mount Sentinel.
There are hundreds of trails around this country. It really is a hiker's paradise. I'd like to go up to the M. There's a trail that led up to the M, and you could go beyond that, or you could go up a side road and then get back on top of the hill and come down past the M. I think that was my favorite, going up there.
In 2007, my grandpa passed away. We knew it was coming, as his health had slowly declined the previous couple of years. But losing someone you love is never easy. She missed him dearly, as do all of his family and friends.
we knew it was going to happen, and so it wasn't as though it was a low blow or a shock or anything. And it was just a relief to know that he, because life just wasn't worth living it toward the end there. Not that he was in pain, but he just was, I think he was uncomfortable. Sunday afternoon, Joy said, I would like to spend some time with Dad, just myself. And so I had some errands to run on Monday morning, and Albert came home too. He was here too. And so he had some things he wanted to do. So when we got back, he was gone. And I was so glad that Joyce was with him, because she was talking to him and holding his hand. And I would have been just sitting there probably, but she was right there. And I'm sure it meant a lot to him to have her there. Whereas I think I would have just been sitting there, but she was talking with him, and this is kind of emotional. Anyway, it couldn't have been easier, because he just quit breathing. She said all of a sudden she knew he just wasn't breathing anymore.
My grandma was never afraid to talk about her own mortality. She always seemed to accept that in this life there is change. We are born, we grow, and we die. Just like the trees she spent so much time with during her years of hiking. She knew that dying was just a part of life.
I don't feel uneasy about dying. I'm not concerned about going to hell and in the fire and stuff. I just am not concerned about that at all. And I feel everybody has to die sometime, and it's not a sad thing to die, I don't think. If you're young, that's different, but I'd say at my age, there's nothing sad about dying.
What do you think happens?
I am kind of anxious to find out. I just don't know I don't know. But I think whatever it is, it's good. It's really strange. Everybody practically is gone. All our friends that we were with frequently, going out, having each other for dinner and that sort of thing. But I'm not sad when I think of them. And I feel, grateful that I had them, but I don't feel lost without them. My life has been just one good luck thing after another. It really has.